Instagram already. Welcome, Instagram. Now we're live everywhere else. Welcome, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, guys. Welcome to another episode of The Good Life. I'm Chris, got Stu and Kobi here with me. What's up, guys?
Hey.
Hope everybody's doing well out there. Hope everybody's doing well. By all means, guys, we appreciate you. Who's getting the echo? Anybody getting it? You still getting it, Stu?
Seems better.
Like, I'm pretty good.
Okay, it might be on my side because I can't turn this off, but it's okay. We're gonna rock and roll, guys. Again, we come to bring you the good life, where we are talking health, wealth, love, and happiness. All the things that are going to help you live the life that you are designing, that you are destined to live, guys. We want to give you the tools, the tips, all the things that you need in order to be able to do that. And we're gonna finish up start a conversation with you today that kind of piggybacks on some of the stuff that we've been talking about, but also just dives into a completely different realm, talking on legacy. Last week, we dove into entrepreneurship. Is that our part two?
Part two.
Yeah, that was our part two, right? Yeah, so we dove into entrepreneurship and some of the common pitfalls and things that happen that deter us from becoming entrepreneurs or becoming extremely successful in entrepreneurship. One of those things that we landed on a bunch last week was education and the education system. I think we stayed there a little bit longer. I think our clubhouse afterwards turned into an education conversation. But either way, today we wanted to kind of finish up on that, but also at the same time go completely to a different realm where we're talking more of the things that move us forward into this good life, specifically a term that we were throwing around before we jumped on, which was legacy. It's our legacy. And what does that actually mean? What are we actually passing down, or what do we see of our lives? As I had said before we had jumped on, after your personal financial life is taken care of, right? After you have a basic level of health, wellness, money, right? Your job situation or work situation, ownership. Once you have those things, because many of you that are listening, you might have everything kind of where you want it right now. You're not in survival mode necessarily. Bills are paid. Your healthy food is, on the table, all of those things. But what's next? Right? What's the next component? What else are you focusing on? What's the next thing that actually will help propel you to that good life? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's talk a little bit of legacy. I think we're going to start it off by just, guys, what's your definition of legacy? I know some people might be hearing that and maybe don't have a full definition of what it is. So what is your definition of legacy? And either one of you jump in. We could just start it off.
Yeah. Happy to hop right in. Appreciate you setting that up so nicely, good sir, MCU. But in terms of really looking at it,
I do what I can.
Yeah. In terms of looking at it, I think oftentimes the term legacy can be a little bit overblown. Like, even think about myself a couple of years ago, it seems like, man, I'm not going to really be in a position to think about that until I'm like 45 or 50 or 55 or whatever, right? But I think legacy has a lot to do with what you're doing right now, right? So we talked about how you set yourself as an entrepreneur, or really as somebody in corporate. You want to build your personal base financially, habit wise, in terms of life structure wise, all these things, putting these things in place. But then when you're done with that, I think that's when, not done with that, but when you have a good handle on that, for example, that's when you start thinking about legacy and really what you're doing now, how that affects, those that you love in the future, those that you care about in the future, or just what you're leaving behind. What kind of energy residue are you leaving behind? So as I was thinking about this week, I started by just highlighting a few parts of life for me that I know are incredibly important. Ones that I would want to make sure I focus on, for myself and my family, and also make a contribution towards on a global level. And then those things that I want to make sure that I pass either good quality or quantity of it down, or maybe just even understanding of how to handle it down, right? Because some of these things aren't as tangible. right? So things that came to mind are, food. For me, especially being the health guy on this panel, our food and our access to food is so incredibly important, because in times of turmoil, in times when things start to get shaky, as we saw last year, one of the first things we really start to think about, or that starts to thin out, is food, and good food. And even in times where things are good, we got to think about the quality of the food that we are getting. I always think, like, it's so easy to go get a meal that you didn't have to do anything for, right? What I mean by this is it used to be that if you wanted mutton, if you wanted, let's say, beef, if you wanted a burger, if you wanted something like that, man, there's a lot of energy that goes into that, right? There's a whole lot of energy that goes into, like, getting that on your plate. So by the time you get that on your plate, you actually you've burnt enough calories, man. You're good. You're good. Go ahead and sit down and eat, right? There's nothing else for you to worry about. But now we just hop in the car, go to the freezer aisle, and then pick out the nice piece, and then we go back, pop it on the stove. That's not enough calories or energy spent to get that food. So one, we don't appreciate it. Two, we don't even, like, give thanks over it, right? We don't pick the ones that are that there's just such a disconnect, right? So I think we're storing that disconnect there. And I got a bunch more that I'll just run through real quick and then let you guys jump in, give yours. Unless you want to comment on that, feel free.
Yes, I think we could stay on the food part. I don't know, Stu, if you had something on the food part, but I definitely do, because that's huge for me when I think of legacy, for sure. And I think we're bouncing around to get everyone's definitions too. But either way, just got to add my 2 cents on this one. The food piece is so important. It's so incredible. The two of our longest term, me and my wife, two of our longest term visions was, one, creating a compound, right? Including bunker and all this type of stuff. We might talk about that stuff. The major thing was it being a sustainable way to have food. So basically a farm, right? Everything that you would be able to grow, if you did need animals, the whole nine, right? Like, that is a huge part of our legacy. Like, I really believe that that's our vision for what we need to have, because we can't depend on the food source and the supply chain over the next 60, 70, 80 years. We can't just depend on that, and we have the ability to do it ourselves. So that's incredibly important. So that's something me and my wife have been talking about. And then sidebar, I'll let the world know on this. I've been working on, like, a vertical farming project for some time now, just because of what you said. Like, at the end of the day, last year when we hit this pandemic, one of the things that got very scary was that food ran out, right? Like, you couldn't get vegetables at certain places. Like, people were, at the height of it, like, ransacking, grocery stores and all types of stuff. If that ever happens again, we have to have a way to be able to grow our own food and know where it's coming from and be able to get it to people in a quick manner. That's another business idea, but that food topic, legacy, all that stuff, it's 100% spot on. Go ahead, Stu.
Yeah, so on the food topic, I think the main thing that comes to mind with legacy on that is passing down, like, good eating habits to my kids. Like, my parents did a strong job in getting me to avoid, like, fast food and a lot of, like, very, like, stereotypical negative things. Like, it was never really a part of my consistent diet. But there were definitely areas of improvement, for sure. There was definitely room for improvement. And I think for me, I'm still trying to perfect the right balance of fun yet efficient, clean food. Like, what is that right balance for me, and what do I want to pass to my children that set them up for success, but also enable them to critically think and make these decisions themselves, like, without just totally accepting, like, what I'm saying as gospel, like, also being able to think about it. Now, for a time, the kids, like, they may not have that ability until a certain age, but to me, I think at the end of the day, we all want better for our kids. And I think that what they eat being such a powerful factor in how their life is going to go is definitely a good idea of, like, just checking out and making sure that they're prepared in the best way possible. We want a better life for them. Like, the food piece is an excellent way to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's critical, man. I also, as we're talking, I find it really interesting, just an observation that we turn quickly to a conversation of better for our kids. Bro, we like 30 something. Like, you know what I'm saying? We still got plenty of life, man. Hey, you know, I think, and I remember seeing a little post that said parents will kill themselves for their kids or whatever, but they won't take care of themselves for their kids or whatever too. So I think it's really important that one of the main things we can do, you know, is in the area of food, and even as we think legacy in general, is what are you doing right now for yourself? Because part of legacy, you know, as we talk about food, that I think a lot of people don't think about is, for example, let's look at like passing on your DNA, right? So there is a particular, like, how you take care of yourself within that 30, 40, 50 years or so, it like matters, right? You alter this. Let's say you're given this jar, right, of whatever it is, just image so you can understand. But we get to now alter it for like 20, 30 years. How we live matters. And it doesn't just matter for the next generation, right? It obviously does, but it matters for us right now, how our what we received is expressed, but also in altering that within a particular range for the next group too. So I think, you know, it's real quick. The conversation really quickly jumps to like for others, but I think first and foremost, start with what we do with ourselves.
Why do you think that happens? I'm curious because I see it on my side a bunch also, but I'm curious to hear your thought. Why do you think that happens, that we kind of pawn it off on the kids?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's a lot easier. Right? As human beings, we do have I believe it's at times easier to place emphasis on saying doing for you know my child, or doing for my father, or doing for. Sometimes it's easier to conceptualize that, right, or to see that. I think that's one of many things that's going on. What do you think?
Yeah, Stu, did you have a take on that one? Like, why do you think?
Why the topic goes to looking out for our kids?
Yeah.
It's such an interesting question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like the idea of it's easier is really resonating with me right now. And I think the idea of like, why are you doing X, Y, or Z, and I'm doing it for my kids, does get thrown out a lot. Like, it's for the kids, you know, like I'm staying together in this relationship for the kids. I'm doing X, Y, and Z for the kids. And what's interesting is like, where do we get off? Like, I think one of the most common examples that I'm familiar with is that one I just mentioned about how, you know, like let's stay together for the kids. Like, they're kind of smart. All right. They recognize that there's something off in the relationship and people don't want to be there anymore. So is it really beneficial to stick around until college for them? Are they getting what they need out of the household for that? So the whole idea of let's do it for the kids, it does seem like a huge oversimplification because, you know, with that example of staying together in the household, you're naturally assuming that your kids are going to be better off because they still are growing up in a two-parent household. You're excluding the fact that they still have two parental figures that love them. They just might live under different roofs. And I'm not going to get into that. As you guys know, I'm not a parent yet, but, and maybe Chris, you might have something on this, but overall, it's an interesting observation. It does seem to be an easy scapegoat. Like, I'm doing it for the kids, and it's like, it gets everybody off your back.
Wait, hold up. I think you snuck in the elephant at the end there. I think there's a lot of pre-packaged respect that comes with it, right? Pre-packaged acceptance, pre-packaged, like, Oh yeah, of course. It's kind of like, wait, really? You're really not going to give up your seat for the pregnant lady? It's like across the board, it's understood that this is the good thing to do and this is the bad thing to do, right? The good thing to do is to, sacrifice yourself and your life for your kids. But the truth of the matter is, like, or you could live an amazing life for your kids too. Like, that's an option. Like, you ain't got to kill yourself, brother. You can live and have them live. Go ahead, Chris.
That's it. That's nail on the head. So I could go, Stu, I could go down that path of the parenting stuff, even outside of this topic, I just had this conversation with a young lady about, like, in a serious relationship with, two married people and kids and the whole nine, who comes first? What's the order? Some people put their kids above their spouse, and it's just not the right way. It's your spouse above your children. And I had to have a little debate about that with somebody because they didn't understand it. And so I could go, like I said, we could have that conversation for some time too. But
I think that's important for a legacy topic.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I'll get back to that point. Let me answer the other side, because I see this all the time in the money space. When I'm sitting down with a parent or somebody that has children and we're talking specifically about them, they want to pawn it off on my child needs to know this. Matter of fact, I'm thinking about them for this. Like, no, that's great. They do need to know it, but you need to know it and you need to practice it now because they have time. You might not have as much time. That's why we need to focus on you. And a lot of times that, right, like they want to just push this off like it's past them, like they can't change or they can't correct or they don't want to change or correct. So it would just be easier to instill this new information into their children. And so they kind of pawn it off. So I've seen that a lot. And I've always kind of wondered what that came from. And a lot of the things that you guys already said is really what I believe it comes from, right? It's just either a lack of accountability or thinking that, like, this is the right thing to do. Because if I say, hey, I'm doing this for my children, I'm taking care of them, then it sounds better or feels better. But in general, a lot of parents, just from a money perspective, a lot of parents are not in the financial position that they need to be in to even give good guidance to their children about what they should do financially, but they're unwilling to work on themselves and their own financial habits and issues and the things that they're seeing. And they just want to, like, start brand new with the children. It never happens that way. So
happens with food, happens with happiness. Same damn thing. Not having it, but still giving advice on it like they know what's about.
It's crazy, right?
It torments me, the idea that that's happening every single day around us.
Yeah, it happens. And like you said, it happens in every area. And that's why we just have to help people understand. And for everyone that's listening and watching this, right, you have to understand that you have to take personal accountability for these things if you want to live a good life. Right? If you want to live that life, you have to take personal accountability and do the work. And then, yes, communicate it to your children or your spouse or your loved ones or whatever about the path you're going on, and that you might not be an expert to tell them. Like you said, Stu, if I'm not happy, if I'm not living my life, well, I can't tell you how to do it. You're just watching me, right? And that goes back to that parenting count. What's the order? God, your spouse, and then your child, or is it God, your child, then your spouse? How do people look at it? I will always let people know. Oh wait, you're muted on this side.
Oh, listen.
There we go.
Listen, they'll try to take my voice, but I won't let them. But I think that's a great point, man. That's a great point. And I would say too, not just as, like, I was looking at something this weekend for a piece I want to put out, which is looking at the 7 baby steps of health. Right? What are kind of the way to really start somebody through and get them to a place where they can quickly follow or check some certain boxes or build their foundation or whatnot. Before we talk about that, though, I think that's a conversation for another day. But the next piece I wanted to talk about was water. So a lot that highly recommend that you read The Choice is Clear. Like, for anybody that has that drinks water, which should be most of us, go ahead and grab that book, because an understanding of good, clean water, where to get it, how to get it, what to do if you don't have access to it, is so incredibly important, because it's one of the things I think we has been like literally covered up, right? Because it's in pipes and whatever. We don't think about it as much. I think a lot of people would be shocked to find out that water that we thought was good for us, or that perhaps was really expensive, so it's good quality, is not. And I think it's something you have to think about in terms of legacy, because it's heavily location based, right? It's one of those things that's like kind of tough to there's something you can do, but if you can get to a good location, you're much better off. So what are your thoughts on good old H2O?
Listen, every wealthy person that I know, they have some form of a well attached to a house of theirs. One, if not all of them, like they have some form of like way to get water.
Access to water.
Access to water in some degree. And it's like you said, we don't think about it. It's something we don't think about, but absolutely, like if you're thinking legacy, if you're thinking about what will be needed in order for your generations to thrive, in order for there to be, after the 100 years you're on this planet, plus or minus some years, whatever, what else will be there? What else will be there? And having water is essential to living, but at some point, if you don't have access to it, what does your generations do? Like, do we think it will always be supplied? Do we take it for granted? I think most of us do take it for granted, right? That we have, especially in the United States, where we can just turn on our faucet outside of Flint, right? Where we can just turn on our faucet and there will be water coming out. So outside of that side,
shout out Flint. Oh man.
Yeah, shout out Flint though, right? Like, but outside of that,
that's a great example, actually.
Yeah, but it's true. I don't think people think about that enough. That like, whole city like didn't have like potable water, like clean water. I don't know if they still do. Like,
who controls your water? I mean, I can't answer some of these questions either, to be honest. Like, all the way up to the top. All right, Stu, did you want to drop your thoughts on that before I share this book?
I mean, I was thinking today, I drank water out of a simple Brita filter, which came from tap water from Fort Lauderdale. I also drank bottled water just out of the blue. And with every time I drink water, I think to myself, it's still not the well water at home. It's just not. It's not the same thing. Like, it doesn't have the same sweetness that the minerals bring to it. It's clearly got chemicals in it. It's processed. It's flat. It's just not enjoyable. And part of me always wonders, like, when am I going to finally move back home and get back on a well and get away from all these chemicals? Because my parents are doing great at their old age. And I think it has to do with the fact that the water they consume is completely pure.
Yeah.
And so to me, like, that's like the legacy that they unknowingly bestowed upon me, is growing up with great water and then moving to a city to have fun and to meet people and sacrificing that. So to me, I think that the legacy behind water is like just informing your kids like how water is not just water. Water is not all the same.
Not at all. Not at all. I think it's so interesting that you mentioned going to the city and to have fun and meet people, and because it always reminds me of the story of the prodigal son, and I think a lot of like if we zoom out and we think about the city as more than just a city, but like kind of like development and new things, and it just always reminds me of leaving kind of the best things we learn, whether it be in kindergarten or with our grandparents on the farm or whatnot. We always leave the good things. We get further away from nature, go deeper into city, into development, into where the bright lights and whatnot is. But our good health and sense of peace and connection to nature and whatnot is actually back home. That's why I guess you guys ever heard, either an Islander or an African or somebody say, I gotta go back to the farm. Take yourself back to the farm. That's when you're getting off course. You're getting too far from base, and I think that's an important concept to keep in mind as we talk about these things. But this is the book.
I always felt that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, the choice is clear. Great book, and this was written before Kangen Water, so it's a great one to pick up and really educate yourself. 2 best sources of water I know of: fruits, electric live water, naturally purified. The big thing with wells is that it's alive, right? Mineral water. So when you get water, otherwise, then you need to either have it be alive or be recharged, right? You need one of the two. If you can't get to the well, then you need to recharge it. But even some wells aren't necessarily less too, right? You still have to test and look at a few more things in that. But
it's huge. Student.
I honestly couldn't even remember what I was going to jump in. Oh, no, that's right. So I have literally felt that exact statement, that exact feeling of, man, have I been in the city too long? Am I losing myself? What just happened? All right, we're back. Every once in a while, my Instagram likes to kick out. Hey, what's up? So I have been at a bar or just in a large group of people and just all of a sudden notice man, I have nothing in common with these people. A lot of these individuals have grown up completely in the city. They've never lived out in the middle of the woods, and just things and priorities and values are different. And who am I to say who's got the better way of living? That's up for everybody to come up with on their own. But for me, that is a very true thing. Just go back to the farm. I like that. I've never heard that before, because there are definitely times when I'm like, man, I'm over it. There are a lot of pros in the sense that there's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of cool people to meet, but what type of meaning do I get from it? Does it pull me away from my values? Are there too many distractions? Is this adding to anxiety? There's just a lot that kind of comes to mind when you mention that prodigal son.
Yeah.
Prodigal only child, I should say.
Yeah, that's so, I think it's critical to really think about that, as when you're feeling off base, out of alignment, disempowered. I think it's really that's for me, those are times when I have to ask myself, do you need to go back to the farm? You got to return to base. You got to reground yourself. I always think it's really interesting too. I'm doing some body work courses, and one of the things you always do is ground yourself, right, before you do anything else. And it also reminds me of grounding, a wire before you connect the batteries in a car, right? It's so important to stay grounded, 10 toes down, right? And I think those things, we can't overlook the little things we say in language to communicate this simple, true wisdom from person to person, right? Well, what does your gut say? Follow your gut. There's a reason we say all of these things. And I think we can pull a lot of truth from them to help us guide us here in this here crazy life in the city.
That's huge. That's huge. I'll take it a step back, since we're having a legacy conversation and we're talking about, sometimes I'm sure there are people that are listening that may not have ever considered legacy or don't even understand kind of what that is. And what you just said could be about grounding. It really just has to do with all right, what do you even know your foundation? Do you even know kind of what the starting point is and what the foundation is for you to build legacy. Because again, a legacy or anything can't be built on shaky foundation. House can't be built. I talk about this in a financial standpoint a lot of times, and I say you need a financial foundation if you want to start getting into investing and that's the 201. You need the 101, which is your foundational things. Same thing on building a legacy. Like, we could talk about, having a water supply and, all of these things. And there's somebody listening potentially that's like, my kid never drinks water. Like, he gets like one glass of water. He gets like a glass of water like a day or something. Like, that's it, like maybe, right? And so, like, just to even know that water being one of those things that we're thinking about, like, man, we got to have access to. Some people aren't even giving their kids or themselves, forget the kids, right? They're not even giving themselves adequate amounts of water, or if that's even important for them. How do we get to a place of understanding, like, what is important, right? Like, I think that's taking it like a step back. Like, how does someone figure out, like, what are the most important things? I know that's what your whole list could be, is like, these are the things that are important for you and your family and your legacy. But you came up with a list. Like, how does someone else come up with a list? Like, I don't, what do you guys think?
Yeah. I think that's a great question, man. I think that's a great question. But I think when you really sit down, I'll offer this. When you sit down and you put pen to paper and you say, what are the different areas of my life that I care about? Like, just care about, right? I think after a while, we'll all come up with kind of the same general, like 7 to 10. Relationships, health. I don't know. You guys name a couple.
Money, right?
Money, there you go. Like
happiness,
right?
Yeah.
So we come up with a very similar list, and then I think you look at that list and you say to yourself, okay, well, where can I grab a blueprint, right? A proven blueprint, and I'll put this block in place, and I'll put this block in place, right? So, for let's say the money one that you guys said at the same time, there's a blueprint, a personal finance blueprint out there for at least the first few steps. You know what I'm saying? At least like the first 4 or 5, like what you got to do, right? There's also in terms of like health, for example, there's a couple few steps that you can take. Now, my advice would be to find an individual who has taken these steps themselves and is willing to be a teacher or guide you through the first few steps so you can build a 101 level, right? And then when you build a 101 level, then you look at what piques your interest for the 2 level, right? And maybe not get ahead of yourself, right? Not get ahead of yourself. So I think looking for the blueprints and those with those that are really out there with good intentions to really try to like help you lay down the foundations. That's the way I've seen it, right? Mentors and books, I'll say. Coaches, mentors, books, and coaches.
That's huge. Stu, did you want to add in 2 cents?
Well, I think the sit down is so important. Just actually sitting down and, like you said, putting pen to paper, or having some type of whiteboard or vision board or anything, like actually going about the exercise of saying, what do I prioritize in life? Because there's a lot of people that don't do that. And that was this guy up until about a year or 2 ago. So you are basically, when you don't sit down and ask yourself, what are my priorities? What are my goals? Like, what do I really want to accomplish? Like, what are my main areas I want to dive into and improve or focus on or stabilize, whatever. If you don't do that, you're allowing your coworkers, your friends, your family to just govern that for you because you're just following along. And most people I know want to think for themselves. They don't necessarily want to just follow along. They fall into that. I think a lot of people unknowingly fall into that. Like, everybody wants to know what the right path is, and if you want to trust the people around you. But if you don't sit down and actually write it out and ask yourself questions and think about it and track it, then you're not even thinking about it. You're just following the norm. And that leaves people with unease, like that discomfort. Like, man, like why do things not feel right? Well, it doesn't feel right because you're following the boilerplate. And it's great to find those blueprints and find those mentors, but you have to actually sit down and think, like, what does this guy know? What does that guy know? How is his perspective more relevant on this particular topic? What do I actually want to prioritize here? So I think the act of actually studying it and being introspective and thinking about your future, being cognizant that you will die one day. Today is not it. It's not like the present is amazing. Being present is fantastic. But if you don't think about the fact that one day you will die and time is running by, then you may not get to all the priorities. You might just get caught up in having fun.
That's huge. That's huge. And we can't, I just read this somewhere. You can't dance your life away, right? You can't dance your life away. At some point, you got to have a path. You got to have some disciplines to go down that path or whatever the case is.
Challenge accepted.
Well, it looks like Kobi is going to try to dance his life away.
We're going to have a dance in the call. Let's do it.
We might have to do this. No, next week, guys, next week. Anyway, but yeah, that's, I wanted to bring the conversation there just briefly for everyone, again, that could be listening, that you haven't taken that time. Legacy is a big conversation. Legacy is a bigger conversation, right? A lot of times, and where we had prefaced this call or this conversation was, after your basic things are met, are taken care of, right? After you figured out your financial stability, you figured out your financial 101, you've got some ownership, you got a business, things are moving for you, you got a family, the bills are paid, you can travel, you have health, you're conscious of your health, you're in good shape, you go to the gym, you eat right, whatever those things are, mentally, you're in a good place, you have healthy relationships, you have someone that you people that you can count on, you have some clarity in your mind, you're not necessarily chicken with his head cut off, running around every day. Like, you have some peace, you have some calm, like you have some of these things. From there, we're talking about legacy. But many of you may not have those things yet. That's hence why we do the show, hence why we're having these conversations. It's to help you start to put some of these things in place. And what Stu just said about just taking time and putting thoughts, pen to paper, just taking time to think about what it is that is important to you or what it is you're trying to get towards is kind of like the base level of figuring this out. Then we can get to the 201. We can get to the second level where we're talking legacy, where we're talking about how are we now thinking of other generations beyond where we are today. So I just wanted to bring the conversation to that place. Could be you got a few more things on your list, though. You can jump in.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you bringing that back as well, because I think we can often get lost pretty quickly when we start to talk about these things, but recognizing that there are foundational steps, right? And I will add to that too, not looking at it like you have to be all the way there to even begin to dream. I think creating something exciting to put in your future so that you're looking forward to that, can be, for some people, can be a pulling factor, right? To dictate kind of how you're going about the present, right? So the things that you're doing now, maybe at times when it gets tough, the things you've got in your future can pull you through those times, right? I think it's important to look at that as well, because sometimes you can get overwhelmed. It's like, well, shoot, I'll never get there, so that I'll never think about it. Right? Or I'll never get there, so what's the point?
I feel like a lot of people are in that place, to be honest. Again, I see it a lot on the money side. Could probably bring it in a few other areas, but absolutely, when someone sees exactly how much it would take for them to retire, right? Like, meaning not work because you want to work, or not work because you have to, work because you want to, but just retire, like whatever that number is. When most people see that, it's way beyond what they felt like they ever needed. And a lot of people from that moment are just like, I'm not going to get there. They literally just just give up. Like, that's just way too far out. right? And then that, again, this is something that we have to overcome as people, to understand that, like, take one step at a time. As long as you have your bullseye, as long as you have the target, you can get there. You can, but you have to continue to push and go. So,
yeah, for sure. And then going back onto this list a bit, one thing I had on here.
You had something. I saw him.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you saw that. You saw that. Yeah.
Oh, you, man.
I think what's interesting about that is the way you mentioned retirement. What if there are individuals out there that don't necessarily care about retirement because they just want to create a lifestyle where they make enough money and they don't mind working because they love the work?
The answer to that question, or what I pose to most people, is that may be correct, but at some point your body will not allow you, nor will your mind allow you to continue to work. That's just what'll happen, right? Like, even if you think you want to work for 70 years of your life, that's great, by all means. However, at some point, if you don't have ownership, let's go back to last week's conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have ownership, you ain't having a job at 79 years old. There ain't nobody hiring you to come do the thing at 79, right? So
yeah.
That's out of the window. So unless you own your thing, you probably won't have work. And on the other side, right, you're going to get older. Are you paying attention to your health? Are you listening to The Good Life? Are we having the conversations? Are you going on your solid food vacation, right? Are you doing those things now? Because if not, when you're 78, your body will break down. Like, your body, like, you won't have the ability to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
You won't have the ability. So there will always come a time that you're going to have to slow it down to a degree or change paths somehow. So
yeah, and that's interesting, because if you don't plan for your retirement, then all of a sudden someone's going to make the plan for you, which means assisted living or something that you don't necessarily have control over because you're not in control of the finances.
Absolutely. Goes back to our conversation last week about ownership. Goes back.
And the older you get, the more expensive your health gets, and that's unforeseen. And I think that,
and the less money you make if you have a job. Both of those things cross, right? Like, as you get older, you're going to start making less money because you're not, like, meaning like after 65, like, you're going to make less because companies aren't going to hold on to you. You're not going to just keep raising an income unless you have ownership. So that's going to decrease. Your income is going to decrease, and your medical expenses and your medical bills and your healthcare will increase. Absolutely. And that's a scary place to be for a lot of people, and they're there. And again, this goes back to the conversation of, we're not talking about the kids here. I'm talking about you, Mr. 56-year-old person.
Well, yeah, right, absolutely. But in some ways you are, because you could be potentially creating a financial burden for your kids. And who wants that?
Absolutely.
1,000%. You absolutely are. You absolutely are. So,
yeah. And that's the link. That's the link. I say, I appreciate you guys bringing it full circle. That's the link. By taking care of yourself and thinking about these things, you are actually taking care of the kids, by not make sure you're not providing them with a burden but blessings. Right. So I think that's huge. Did we want to attack the next one with the time?
Yeah. What you got?
All right, cool. So we got energy, and we'll put it together: energy and security. All right. I think if you look at, start to look at your pie, because one thing when you get to the legacy level, at least the way I conceptualize it, you start looking at ways to be financially independent, right, of the system, right? You're independent of the matrix in and of itself. And one thing you got to think about is, when you look at the pie of your expenses and what you spend after you get out of food and shelter, you get to energy. And I think a lot of us also don't think about security. But once your personal wealth starts to grow, that's when you see the Charles Barkleys and whatnot with their own security guards, right? Because the stakes get a little higher. And I think that's natural. And a lot of people don't think about that because it seems like really far away. But I don't know, man. If 2020 taught us anything, it's you have to stay prepared.
So in a minute. Yeah.
So that's two right there: energy, security, barterability. Looking at things that you have that, and I think this is really interesting. Barterability and wealth preservation. Looking at things you have that, throughout all of society, has been recognized as having value, and having value outside of the direct use of currency, right? So having value bearing, whether it's jewelry or as a conductor or as a other value, right? And silver and gold has always been that. For a period of time, it was like salt, but then they realized that silver and gold kind of outlast salt, right? Shout out to the salt mines of West and North Africa. Go ahead. What you guys have to say on those things, right? Or you want me to finish the list?
No, I mean, I have a few things I could touch on when it comes to security. Tell me first your thoughts, though, could be about security. Like, what is your thought? Because one of the first things that comes to my mind is just guns. Just like, are you ready? Like, like what else falls under your thoughts of security?
I think to me, it kind of ties to your health too, man, like personal security. And that starts from from me as an individual being, within the weapons that I have on me, being as prepared as possible, right? There was a period where I was working and I was in corporate and I was like, I ran up the steps a little bit and I was like, oh, I can't do that anymore. I was like, wait, that's no, that's not a good thing. So I think you start at that level, and then you look at the level of having, additional security, whether it be in the form of guns, like you stated, but also a lot of things don't get to that level. A lot of things just get to you being able to handle yourself, right? And then I look at if you got talking about land, large plots of land, then at some point too, you're definitely gonna have to have some sort of further security for sure.
For sure. The running up the stairs, link that to security. Maybe I'm not getting it, but like, how is?
Oh yeah. If you can't,
like, just being able to fend for yourself.
Yeah, if you can't physically, at the very least, just take care of yourself. Whether it me just fit enough to at least move myself or at least like remove myself from danger. Because when we look at it's fight or flight, right? Listen, if you can, it's better to get out of there, right? If you can get away, that's probably choice number one. Very few choose fight first. But I think looking at that as being that first line of defense, because it could, we're probably more likely to have like a wallet stolen or something, or like somebody threatened or than to have like an actual gun encounter or whatnot. But even then, truthfully, my thought process has shifted significantly over the years in regards to firearms.
That makes sense. How, damn, I had a question. I totally forgot. I was thinking about, I had like 30 other things I was thinking about. But for that oh yeah, that's what I was thinking. Where does this like Darwinism, where does this like survival of the fittest fall in? When I hear security and that kind of realm, that's how I think of things. I think of like, we're species. It really is survival of the fittest. Over time, your genes evolve and right, like what you choose to pass down. And if your legacy is that of unhealth and right, just things that won't survive over time, your species, your family name, all that, like, you won't be around, right? If you can't physically and actively like constantly push your generations forward and have the health in order to be able to do so, that falls directly into legacy for me. And that's
you got to think of, we got to think of, it wasn't too long ago where it was really actually, quite frankly, you just, whatever land you and your family can protect is what you have, right? So I mean, I'm not saying things necessarily going back towards that, but at the same time, I think we can't continue to move in the direction where the only form of security is provided by the state.
Oh yeah,
I think there's a lot of issues.
Oh, absolutely.
I like that you woke up to that. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. Well, I enjoy this conversation a lot because I'm a proud supporter of the Second Amendment, because I think that the reason it was even created was because of the British government starting to go into people's houses, taking away individuals' firearms, and you having absolutely nothing you can do about it. There's no one there. If all of a sudden the government's overextended their reach, what are you going to do? Throw a rock? they got a musket, and that's how this whole thing started. And to me, I think I always find it very interesting how when it comes to the idea of personal security, I literally, like, my brain doesn't really shut off on that. I'm pretty much always having conversations, educating my partner on, if situations arise, like, here's what you should do. Because as a guy, it's my responsibility um, to take care of my family. And part of that is knowledge. And I have a lot of conversations about, like, I remember being at UVA, and right before I went to UVA, there was the Virginia Tech shooting. So as soon as I'm at UVA in college classes, I'm like, man, like, what happens if somebody comes in here? Like, I kind of want to have a little bit of a game plan. Like, if he comes in door A, I'm out the back. If they both come in both doors, well, I'm making a move to try and take one of them. Like, these types of conversations, I'm serious. That's how I think, man. It's probably because I love Call of Duty. It's the same thing. So, it is. I love the point that you just brought up about not relying on the government to protect you, because I could go into this for a long time. That is so fundamental. Don't rely on anybody else to protect you. Don't rely on anybody else to give you water. Don't rely on anybody else to give you food. Don't rely on anybody else to protect you. It is nice to have some of those things in place to choose from, but at the end of the day, back against a wall, we are animals. There is a fight or flight instinct, and for a split second in a hostile situation, individuals will act for self-preservation. And are you going to be ready, or are you not going to be ready? And that's like the most fundamental fight, flight, or freeze situation. I will never be a freeze. Like, I've basically trained myself on that. Like the horror movies where you stop and turn around and watch the guy come out. No, that's not going to be me. So on the issue of
Stu. So you're not the white guy in movies that's like, what's behind this door?
No. I'm not even in the movie because I never put myself in that situation. But like, I love the topic of security because, we mentioned firearms and not necessarily relying on the state to protect you because, there's so much controversy over whether or not the government is properly protecting us and respecting our rights. Well, the beautiful thing about the right to bear arms is you get to protect yourself. That's a solid fallback. But, as far as other types of security, as regarding legacy, I think the first thing that people think about is financial security. That's like the most common thing people think about in society, I think, is like, I want to leave like a nest egg or some type of ownership, or at least, some type of inheritance for my kids. And I think that makes sense. That's the currency we have right now. Other types of security, emotional, when it comes to relationships. Do you feel stable and secure in your relationship? How important is that to you? To some people, it's not. If you find two very independent people who, they both have their own businesses, their own career paths, they enjoy having someone as a partner, but they are not dependent on one another. They could easily say, man, it's just not working out. I love you, you love me, but it's not the right time. And whatever, they go separate ways. Some people don't need that kind of security. What other types of security are there? I love this topic. What else we got?
I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. When I think security, like, again, my brain just keeps going back to this protection, right? How are we protecting ourselves? How are we protecting our legacy? How are we protecting things? And so a lot of the stuff that you said, Stu, 1,000%.
Yeah, I think it was a great expansion of that. At this point, I think you got to really think about digital security for personal and family.
That is huge.
As far as privacy, what do you mean?
Yeah, privacy, information. I mean, at this point, like internet to internet everything capability devices, like you're pretty much in your house, but also just in terms of just phones and like understanding the privacy that we give up in exchange for utilizing platforms, Facebook, Google, all this stuff. Like, I think there's a whole like crazy situation building in the digital world that we like will not understand for quite a while. And by the time we do, as to just how much information is really out there on each individual's movements, and it really like your accounts haven't been hacked just because you're not that interested, or I'm not that interested. It really is what it is.
That's all it is. Because
Not yet.
Yeah.
All of it, like the cybersecurity is one of those things, one of those industries that I know is like we've got to pay attention to. It's going to be huge because the internet's 25 years old or whatever it is, right? 30 years old now, really, for us using it. But we don't know. We never really understood. We never got the crash course, or no one really educated us about like what we give up, just like Kobi said, just like what are we giving up for our privacy? It's for convenience. Like what are we actually doing, and how is that secure? Our information is all across the internet. Every single thing that you think is secure is not. Just like Kobi said, like the only reason you haven't been hacked is because you don't have anything that people want. Right? Like from all the data breaches, from anyone being able to tap your stuff, like because we use all of these different devices and computers and all this stuff, like it's a real thing that we have to pay attention to, especially like you said, if we're paying attention to legacy, we've got to understand that cybersecurity is going to be huge. The other security side, as we wrap up, I want to have a robot. Like robots are going to kill humans eventually.
I don't want a robot anywhere near me.
I absolutely do, for security, like my RoboCop, like real talk, like actually like something that patrols my land or keeps the house safe, or like an actual like thing I can program that keeps me safe and keeps my family safe.
Keywords there. You can program.
Yes.
Yeah, you have control over.
Yeah.
You hope.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah,
right? We hope, right? That's a whole nother side, but maybe we jump into something like that next week. I don't know. We have a bunch of stuff going on, guys, but it's an hour. We made it to another hour. Thank you for everybody that's been tuned in. Hopefully this is adding value to all of you guys. Again, we jumped on here to make sure that we could have these conversations that could benefit you, to help you get closer to the good life and help you start to put these things in place. But we're here every single Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, right here on live. Press that thumbs up button, follow us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, right? Whatever you got to do, keep showing up, share this with a friend. We're really trying to help people get to where they need to be. And it's 9:00 now, so we're about to jump into Clubhouse for the after party. So we got the after party going on over in Clubhouse. I think Danette already popped it up that the room is open and ready to rock and roll. So for those of you that are following us and watching us live, feel free to jump over there on Clubhouse. We will jump in and we'll continue this same conversation, maybe get some of your feedback, hear some of your insights, so that we can continue this conversation on legacy and the good life. So until next week, guys, we're signing off for another episode of The Good Life. Take care. Keep living the good life.